To many, many years of lies being told about me and my family, there comes a point where, again, going back to the relationship between certain members of the family and the tabloid press.
The lie shattered in one brutal second. The second the palace stopped protecting him. Because this story is not about family drama, not about feelings, not about estranged brothers anymore. This is about a prince who quietly slipped into financial freefall, and the moment the crown decided to let him fall. Behind the polished smiles, behind the California sunshine, behind the carefully edited speeches about freedom and healing, a number was growing, then exploding, then spiraling completely out of control. $100 million, possibly more. A debt so large it would crush most Hollywood dynasties overnight. And for the first time since the day he was born, Prince Harry discovered something terrifyingly simple. Titles don't pay bills, and bloodlines don't stop creditors. The world woke up thinking reconciliation was in the air. Holiday rumors, soft headlines, whispers that King Charles might finally extend a quiet olive branch. But while the public was distracted by sentiment, London was bracing for impact. Unmarked vehicles moved through rain-slicked streets, no cameras, no smiles, no forgiveness. Senior royals weren't gathering for dinner, they were gathering for damage control. Inside St. James's Palace, the mood wasn't emotional, it was surgical. On the table wasn't family history, it was survival. Spreadsheets replaced sympathy. Ledgers replaced love. And the question nobody wanted to ask finally had to be spoken aloud. Could the monarchy afford to keep Prince Harry attached to it anymore? For years, the palace absorbed the shockwaves. Interviews, accusations, books, streaming confessions. Each time they swallowed the damage quietly, believing the storm would pass. But storms don't pass when they're being monetized. And now, the financial truth had ripped through the last illusion. Harry wasn't just controversial. He was financially radioactive. The man holding the numbers wasn't sentimental. He never is. Sir Michael Stevens, the keeper of the Privy Purse, doesn't see fairy tales or family trees. He sees risk. He sees liability. And what he laid out that night was not scandal. It was mathematics so unforgiving it sucked the air out of the room. Columns of numbers told a story nobody wanted to hear. Failed ventures, legal obsessions, lifestyle inflation that assumed the royal safety net would always be there. A belief so deeply ingrained Harry never questioned it. Why would he? For decades it always caught him. But this time the net was gone. The Montecito mansion, once marketed as a symbol of independence, sat at the center of the storm. A $14 million purchase that quietly metastasized into a cash-eating machine. Variable interest rates turned vicious. Property taxes bled 6 figures annually. Staff salaries piled up, security costs ballooned, gardens designed to hide from the world cost a fortune to maintain. The house didn't represent freedom anymore. It represented burn rate. This wasn't wealth. It was exposure. Streaming deals that were supposed to save everything collapsed under their own weight. Netflix cooled. Spotify walked away. Public enthusiasm faded. The content pipeline dried up. The advances were already gone, swallowed by production costs and lifestyle commitments built on the fantasy that more money would always be coming. Then came the lawsuits. Lawsuits piled on lawsuits. Every perceived insult dragged into court. Millions spent chasing validation instead of victory. Each case burning cash while amplifying headlines. A strategy driven by emotion, not outcome. Vindication doesn't compound, legal bills do. And beneath it all, the most dangerous assumption of all, lenders believed the royal family would never let Harry default. Credit flowed because legacy stood behind him like an invisible guarantor. That assumption was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Security costs pushed the insanity into overdrive. Presidential level protection without presidential infrastructure. Armed guards, armored vehicles, counter surveillance, rotations that drained millions annually. Fear fed spending. Spending fed desperation. Desperation demanded publicity. Publicity intensified fear. A vicious, self-consuming loop with no off-ramp. By the time Stevens finished, nobody in the room was arguing. They were calculating. Because this wasn't about helping Harry anymore. This was about preventing his collapse from contaminating the crown itself. The room didn't erupt. It didn't fracture. It went cold. King Charles saw humiliation, William saw risk, Anne saw a liability metastasizing, and somewhere between paternal instinct and institutional survival, a line began forming. Sharp, final, irreversible. What Harry didn't know, thousands of miles away under the California sun, was that his life was about to change without a single argument, without a raised voice, without a public announcement. The monarchy wasn't preparing to punish him. They were preparing to detach. And once that decision crystallized, there was no emotional path back. Only protocol, precision, and consequences. What happened next inside that room was not loud. It was worse than that. It was quiet, procedural, and final. The kind of silence that only exists when a decision has already been made and everyone knows there's no one doing it. King Charles spoke first, and for a moment, the father surfaced before the monarch. He looked at the numbers and didn't see columns or percentages. He saw headlines. Bankruptcy courts. A son of the king dragged through American financial filings like a failed celebrity. The humiliation would be global, relentless, and impossible to control. He floated the idea that felt instinctive to him. A private loan, discreet, structured, invisible to the public. Not a gift. Never a gift. Just enough to silence creditors, buy time, and let Harry breathe. But that was when the temperature changed. Prince William didn't argue emotionally. He didn't raise his voice. He reached into his briefcase and placed a leather-bound report on the table like a verdict waiting to be read. This wasn't about saving Harry, he said. This was about stopping the monarchy from funding its own erosion. And then he said the sentence that ended the debate. Harry is no longer just family. He is a business entity whose survival depends on attacking us. That landed hard. William didn't speculate. He demonstrated. Every major income spike Harry had enjoyed came from grievance, interviews, documentaries, memoirs. Each private conversation became content. Each attempt at reconciliation was repackaged as betrayal. Compassion wasn't healing wounds. It was fueling a narrative machine that required the royal family to remain villains forever. If they rescued him now, William argued, they wouldn't save him. They would bankrupt themselves slowly while financing the next attack. A bailout wouldn't end the story. It would guarantee another chapter. Then came the most devastating reality check of all. The victim narrative collapses if the villain pays the bills. If the crown steps in, Harry loses his product. And a man without a product, still spending like a head of state, will simply find new enemies to monetize. Princess Anne didn't hesitate when her turn came. She stripped the emotion clean off the discussion. Trauma explains behavior, she acknowledged. It does not justify recklessness. Compassion does not mean complicity. And then she delivered the metaphor that sealed Harry's fate. You do not allow one sailor to drill holes in the hull because he claims the sea frightens him. What Harry represented now was not a wounded family member. He was a risk vector, a reputational contagion, a financial exposure that lenders, media, and adversaries could exploit indefinitely as long as the palace remained attached. That's when the phrase entered the room, toxic asset. In finance, a toxic asset isn't something you hate. It's something you can't sell, can't fix, and can't afford to keep. As long as it stays on the balance sheet, it threatens everything else. Anne said it without cruelty, without drama. Just fact. If the monarchy paid this debt, it would signal something dangerous to the world, that no matter how far Harry went, no matter how destructive the fallout, the crown would always absorb the damage. That precedent would never die. So instead of a bailout, they chose isolation. Sir Michael Stevens opened the final folder. This wasn't emotional policy. It was architecture. A complete financial severance designed to remove Harry from the monarchy's risk ecosystem permanently. No speeches, No confrontation, just execution. The first pillar was absolute, a sovereign firewall. No royal funds, no indirect support, no back channel assistance, no exceptions. Not now, not later, not ever. Harry's finances would live and die entirely on their own. The second was more brutal, a global credit freeze. Banks and lenders would be quietly informed that there were no royal guarantees, implicit or otherwise. The invisible cushion Harry had lived on for decades would vanish overnight. Credit terms would harden, rates would spike, access would shrink, the name alone would no longer unlock doors. The third ended the illusion completely. No more personal appeals, no emotional calls, no half in, half out ambiguity. All communication routed through legal walls built specifically to feel nothing. This wasn't punishment. It was quarantine. By midnight, signatures were placed, not ceremonially, practically. The protocol activated without announcement, without leaks, without warning the man it would crush. Half a world away, the sun rose over Montecito like nothing had changed. Harry woke up believing what he had always believed, that the family would intervene before catastrophe, that the Bank of Paw would never truly close. That legacy functioned like gravity. The call came instead. Professional, cold, polite, final. I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. No explanation satisfied, no urgency acknowledged. Requests denied. Then the line went dead. Emails followed. Formal, unemotional. Invoices arrived. Renovation costs. Outstanding obligations. The message was unmistakable. You are no longer a beneficiary. You are a debtor. Back channels failed. Numbers disconnected. Trusted intermediaries vanished. Servers deactivated. The silence wasn't hostile. It was worse. It was institutional indifference. Standing on his terrace, Pacific stretching endlessly ahead, Harry felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not grief, but exposure. For the first time in his life, there was no invisible hand smoothing the edges, no palace absorbing the impact, no emergency parachute. The titles remained. The leverage did not. The California dream didn't explode dramatically. It began collapsing quietly through frozen credit, unanswered calls, tightening margins, and the dawning realization that independence had arrived without a safety net. The St. James Protocol was never about revenge. It was about accountability, about drawing a line between privilege and responsibility. Harry demanded autonomy while assuming protection would remain. That contradiction finally snapped. Freedom came with a bill, and for the first time, the bill had his name on it alone. This wasn't exile. This was adulthood, unfiltered, unforgiving, and unpaid. The crown didn't destroy him. It stepped aside and let reality do the work. And in Montecito, under flawless blue skies, a prince learned the cost of independence is never symbolic. It's financial. It's permanent. And it's due in full.